I'm Guy McPherson of the Nature Bats Last YouTube channel, which is how you found me. And I'm here today to talk for the 7th time in recent history with Peter Miller, clinical psychologist. And we've been delving into the topic of psychology and the human brain and our individual interactions and what that means at the community or societal level for a couple of months now. So let's continue that conversation. Peter, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we have been exploring, I guess, different mindsets in people and the related institutions, sometimes the related political orientation. We've been talking about some of our individual experiences, pursuing our work, and I guess diving into this subject. We've been sharing my mental health course, which I'm glad to say there's been about 30 enrollments now, and I hope that it is doing some good in the world. For some reason, I think there's a lot of us out there who have experienced awful things, and then for some reason we want to try and reduce that in the world. And I know I'm not the only one. There's lots of other people who have basically followed the same path. They experience a very difficult mental health issue, and then they prepare some resources, and then they try and share them with the world and hold classes even sometimes, and hope that it makes a little bit of a difference, because it's just such a shitty way to have to live and not even know how to fix it. So the course is at freebpdcourse.com, and it's there for anyone to access at any time, and basically includes everything that I've ever learned, plus lots of supplementary material from other professionals to just add to each of my points in each of the lessons, and also full of resources you can use like on your phone and stuff, so you can build it into your life and so forth. So other than that, so yeah, I've been wanting to talk to Guy some more about what it is like to kind of occupy the positions that we do, as we're trying to be educators and helpers, and also I guess to build awareness in the world. And it's meaningful work, but it's also very challenging work. And there have been when we used to have comments on the videos, and I remember getting some very nasty feedback in comments about my thoughts, and I know 100% Guy has gotten that probably 100-fold compared to me, but still, it's a difficult thing to have to endure while you're trying to offer something helpful in the world. So I was wanting to get maybe just get a few examples of your experiences there, Guy, where you're trying to be helpful, you're trying to be informative, you're trying to help people understand things in the world as they are, and in what's happening with our environment, and then you sort of just get sometimes beaten up in return.
Well, yeah, there's a reason YouTube is called the troll farm. Almost all the comments I get, when comments are allowed, are horrible, awful things. And of course, almost everybody on YouTube is using an alias, so you don't have any idea who these people are that are saying terrible things about you. And I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse. We're both relatively sensitive people. If we weren't, we wouldn't be in these positions. You wouldn't be doing the work you are doing. I wouldn't have done the work I was doing. And so when you're at the receiving end of those terrible comments, we take it very personally, even though it's not even coming from a person, it's coming from an alias, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's tough to take, at least for me, and probably for you as well, probably for most people. And how do we forge on in light of this, right? So I adhere mostly, and it's important to say mostly because it's not entirely, to the ideas, to the concepts of modern stoicism, which is rooted in stoicism of ancient Greece. And perhaps the most important of those is to acknowledge what you have control over and then proceed accordingly. And to also recognize what you don't have control over and just to let that go. Obviously, that's easier said than done. But if I were to encapsulate modern stoicism into a nutshell, it's that basically one thing. What do I have control over, and how can I exert control in a positive manner? What do I not have any control over, and let that go? Or to use the Zen Buddhist expression, let go or be dragged. And and it's tough, the defamation campaign that has essentially destroyed first my so-called professional life, my ability to deliver presentations, go on speaking tours, even remotely more recently, and then leading to loss of many friendships and connections at the family level. So that's tough. It's tough to keep in mind the idea that there are things I have no control over when my life seems to be spiraling out of control in ways that never would have happened had I remained on campus, because I would have a legal team from the university representing me, and this sort of thing just wouldn't happen. So how to go forward? I mean, and that's what I've been trying to answer for myself since I left campus life, May 1st, 2009. How do I go forward from here? Because I discovered early on that I'm a teacher, that I can't help myself, even if it has terrible consequences for me and others. I can't help relaying evidence to people. That's been a horrible thing.
Yeah, it's not easy being honest. I'm sure there was a philosopher that said, if you want to be liked, then don't be honest, or or if you're going to be honest, kind of expect consequences. I can't remember the quote, but it's something along those lines.
Right.
And like I'm similar in a way that when I talk to people about psychology, I'm like, all this mental illness doesn't happen by chance. Like, we are embedded in a cultural context. I explain this to people who are open to it, right? And it's not just that you have failed in certain ways, but you are in a failing system that is either accidentally or by design, set up to set you up for failure in ways. Sometimes people, I'm sure I lose some people, like just like that, right? If I bring up the idea that systems play a role in our health, because they're so focused on the individual and individualism, and I can tell when I've got a heavy right-wing person in my office, I think, because either they shut up or they just kind of have that look on their face that they're not too amused by my opinion that way.
Maybe it's your t-shirt.
Maybe. Well, I'm not allowed to wear my Misfits t-shirt at work. I have to conform a little bit to whatever the policy of the organization, and I guess I would be wearing attire a little bit more like yours at work.
Right. Well, and this
home,
is what I did.
It's different.
This is what I did on campus every day in Tucson, Arizona, where it gets relatively warm. Some of my colleagues wore shorts every day of the year, which made them a lot tougher than me because it's relatively cold, even in Tucson, Arizona. And when I was teaching, I always wore a shirt like this one, a button-down shirt and a decent pair of pants, right? So I just thought that was part of the professional uniform. If I'm going to be taken seriously, then I need to dress like I'm taking this whole thing seriously. So I couldn't be that person who wore a t-shirt and a pair of shorts just to be more comfortable.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was trying to balance that with not creating more barriers between me and the students. And I'd point out the first day of class that there are already a lot of things that make us different, right? I'm generally more knowledgeable about the topic that we're going to be covering this semester than you are. I'm older than you are. I make more money than you do, probably. And so we have all these differences, all these things that drive us apart. And I would use this information as an introduction to the idea that we're going to use first names. So you call me by my first name. I'll call you Bill, you call me Guy, because we have enough things that separate us. We don't need even more by me expecting you to call me Dr. McPherson or Professor McPherson. There's plenty of things that separate us already. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but again, it seems like there's a lot of things that separate all of us as individuals, more than 8 billion people on the planet now. And as my brother used to say in his university classes, remember that you're unique, just like everybody else. So a little bit of a joke there, but also each of us is truly unique. We know enough about DNA to know that we are all, in fact, different. Even so-called identical twins are different, though you and I might not be able to tell the difference. There are things going on in the brain that make any two people different. So I like to keep that in mind, the notion that we are all different, and also the notion that in many ways we are all the same, that at some level we are one, and the more we act like it, the better off we will all be.
Yeah, if we could actually, and that reminds me of more the left side of the spectrum, which is cooperation, working together, appreciating our similarities, rather than trying to make everything about the individual, right? And I've mentioned before that I think probably people accessing these videos and that this topic are probably more in that mindset, like kind of like, it would have been nice if we could have learned how to work together in a sustainable manner, rather than having to focus on the individual and kind of get tied up in all the narratives that focus on the individual, the American dream and so on. And I think lots of religious narratives try and get people to focus on your individual responsibility, and sort of like that's ultimately what you're here for, is to earn your prize at the end of the life cycle and after death. And anyway, I mean, I could go on and on about that in a sort of a very frustrated way. Tried not to use today's video for that, because I mean it's all around us, and I know like today lots of people are going to church to celebrate their whatever, and try and convince themselves that they're doing something good for the world. And psychologically, from all I've learned, I think it's absolutely the opposite, even though it can appear on the surface to be virtuous. I think I've heard the word virtue signaling, or the phrase virtue signaling there, where people, and politicians do this too. I think they try and make it look like they're doing something good, but actually they're just carrying on with business as usual, with whatever, the paper straws and we're doing away with plastic bags. So, we sure look virtuous, and we're doing good things for the environment, and we're going to turn everything electric, and that's going to solve all our problems. But it's again, it's just lies. I mean, if you're honest enough and you're willing to think deeply, I mean, you can see through the pretense. It's just this pretense. Even when I was working for the federal government in the jail system, I'm like, this is pretense. Like, why would we even have a psychology department? I really don't think that they care a lot about rehabilitation in prisons. It's more about making it look like they have done something or punished the individual who did something wrong. And to have a psychology department there is kind of a joke, because they had us mostly doing risk assessments as opposed to doing therapy. Like, there was a little bit of therapy and a little bit of group learning, but it's primarily about assessing risk. Is this person going to reoffend? That's mostly what they care about. So when they have their parole meeting, they can have the psychological assessment that says what percentage, are they a risk to community, society. So anyway, it's just another example of pretense, right? And I'm guessing you were frustrated by that as well in the professional world, and being involved in big institutions. Like we make it look like we're doing good, but are we, kind of thing, right?
Oh yeah, ego, pretense, it's all about the money. University system, college system, it's all about the money. And that's the primary reason I walked away, is that I just couldn't take it anymore, because it was all about the money. I mean, there's all kinds of virtue signaling going on, suggesting otherwise, but anybody paying attention figured it out right away. You know, the people who get rewarded as faculty members are the ones who generate grant funding. Grant funding with a minimum 50% indirect cost rate. So if I generate a grant for $100,000, the university gets $50,000. That's minimum. So, and I understand that it takes a lot to hold the whole system together, right? There's a sponsored projects department. There's all kinds of people working to make sure the grant money gets funneled to the right place. I understand all that, but oh man, it has really become a serious case of the tail wagging the dog. And when I recognize that, one, it was the monetary system driving us to extinction, everybody chasing after the almighty dollar, and two, the university system being part and parcel of that whole thing, I couldn't see why I would be involved in this sort of thing anymore. It didn't seem virtuous from the definition, the actual definition of that word, as opposed to virtue signaling. So
so it's like, you know, you can't be honest. You can't be honest about you can't be honest about what's happening with the earth, and I don't think people can be honest about what's happening, I don't know, in all aspects of their life, if they are trying to play the game. It's like, so you think you can be honest and play the game at the same time, right? Like, I think that's what probably a lot of your whatever scientific adversaries, whatever they're trying to play the game, right? While
yes,
while
absolutely.
still, and they think they're being honest, but you can't do both.
Exactly. And I was teaching in various incarceration institutions for my last few years on campus. And I thought it was important work, but I also acknowledged that it was part of a completely corrupt system. Since the Reagan administration in this country, so in the early to mid 1980s, it's been a private system, a private prison system. So there is an incentive to make sure that nobody ever gets fixed, that there that everybody who goes out of the prison comes back into the prison. That's where the money is. And so you look around at the administration of the organizations I was working within, and it was pretty difficult to understand how they thought they were helping individuals for the long term, because I don't think they were. I think they were helping themselves. They were helping their own system to grow and to make money by incarcerating people. And I mean, that's just one of thousands of things wrong with the whole corrupt, awful, civilized system.
Yeah, one example of many where it's sort of, you look like a legitimate business, but it's more like human trafficking or something like that,
right? Right. And for me as an individual, it's very difficult to work within that system, recognizing how horrible it was. So my colleague who founded Poetry Inside Out was actually thrown out of the federal prison system, the whole system, because, well, the first time she was thrown out, she took in contraband. She took in a greeting card, and you can't do that. And so she worked really hard to get back into the system, and then she brought in somebody, Jimmy Santiago Baca, who is a renowned poet. He was in the Arizona State Prison from the time he was 18 until, I don't remember how long, but quite a while. Then he came out. When he came out, he was an award-winning poet who had position in name only, basically, to a university. And this was during the Iraq War. And after he delivered a presentation at the federal prison in Tucson, Arizona, somebody asked him what he thought about the Iraq War and the Iraqi people. And he knew this was dangerous ground. So he looked up and he looked down and he looked around and he was really hesitant. He said, I think we could learn a lot from the Iraqi people. And that's when my colleague who founded Poetry Inside Out was banned forever from teaching in the federal prison system.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Because Jimmy Santiago Baca put what was perceived as a positive spin on the enemy, the Iraqi people.
Mm. Wow. That's not allowed.
I couldn't make this up.
No. So yeah, I mean, that's another example, I guess, of how it's hard to live the life of someone who speaks more truthfully, right? It's if you dare, right? I guess it comes with different kinds of consequences. If you're not going to just fall in line with the mainstream, right? And sort of give them the benefit of the doubt that they are doing good for humanity. And, we would all benefit if we would just sort of stop looking for problems and complaining.
Right.
I've tried to just follow suit, and I just felt sick to my stomach every day. Really, I just can't do mainstream very well, or for very long, because I guess just my perception is different. Like I see the things that they don't, or they don't, they were never trained to see because of whatever their types of experience and education. So, I mean, and a lot of it has to do with my job too. Like when you meet with thousands of people and you learn about their lives and their histories, right, and how they experience life in this system, you start to see patterns. And I've mentioned this in my course too. Like it becomes quite apparent that it's really hard to be healthy, especially mentally healthy, in this system, and especially if you have any genetic inherited sensitivity or predisposition, right? Like it's really, really, really hard. It's like growing up in a financial system, but not really knowing how to use it in a way where you can reap the benefits of it. It's not like the banks are telling you all the tips and tricks about how to get ahead. I think they more want you to be in debt, right? And
of course,
they want you to get stuck in debt rather than figure out how to liberate yourself from the debt tyranny. But yeah, so like, I mean, and the information is out there, I guess, to kind of be more free, but they just aren't giving it to you, right? It's not part of what we receive when we're young, for the most part, unless maybe you have someone or someone that you'll listen to that can help you.
Right, and we've talked about this before, how there's, from the perspective of 99+% people in this country and probably in the world, there's one way to live, right? Everybody does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
When the founder of Poetry Inside Out had 2 children, and one of them was a tagger, right? Always putting graffiti up, most notably putting up same. And you've probably seen this on train cars and office buildings and so on. There's a lot of people out there who are putting up same because that was their view. As a teenager, this kid understood that that's the expectation, is that everybody is going to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the organization was called Poetry Inside Out. So the founder referred to her son as, if he keeps this up, he's going to be practicing poetry inside in. He's going to be in all the time. He's going to be incarcerated. And that's right. That's right. I mean, he was pointing it out literally and not taking credit for it. And other people do take credit for it and point it out. And that doesn't go well.
Yeah, if you get caught. Right. So yeah, I mean, and we were going to mention today too, sort of the intellectual investment and the energy investment that goes into our sort of our chosen ways of communicating with the world, or our chosen. Maybe we didn't choose it. Maybe we can't help it. This is just the way that we see the world. But so energy investment, intellectual investment. Like I put about 10 years of my life part-time into that course because, as I said, I wanted to share these things to reduce some of the suffering. And honestly, I wanted to help myself know the material better. But anyways, about 10 years goes into that, right? And then at the tail end of the 10 years, I thought I'm gonna like make this even better. I'm gonna make this a course, right? And then being an idealist, people are gonna appreciate it, and I'm gonna have 1,000 students, and it's gonna be, we're gonna make a big dent in mental health, and and I don't know if I'm gonna fall for this again inside myself, because what really happens is that there's not very many people who care to know what you are wanting to offer. And if people had, their way with me, they might even tell me that I had some sort of bad motivation for what I'm doing.
Of course. Of
But
course, I get that all the time. I'm sure you do too. You're
yeah,
only in it for the money. You're only in it for the privilege. You're only in it because it benefits you, and on and on and on.
yeah.
You
So yeah,
you
you've had the same thing, like this sort of this lack of understanding. Like, why would they just honestly want to teach people about how to have a better life and to know how it all how people get sick, and you're basically, it's like teaching people how the ecosystem got sick, right? And the natural consequence of that. You're just trying to
right.
honestly point it out, and then
And
what do you get in return, right?
exactly. And also pointing out that there is something we can do. It won't necessarily fix the system, but it can make us live more meaningful, fulfilling lives. Right? I mean, and isn't that what we all ought to be looking for anyway? Is a way to have a meaningful, fulfilling life.
I guess
You know,
it depends what if you've been indoctrinated into the mainstream or not.
absolutely.
What is a good life? What is a fulfilling life?
And so I guess my message is intended only for the 0.001% who haven't been fully indoctrinated, who recognize that there's more to life than making money for billionaires, to chasing the pursuit of being the privilege of being able to drink beer and watch sports on television on the weekend.
Yeah. Well, and I think the part of the indoctrination and the narrative is to how to inflate the ego instead of understand what the ego is, which is kind of like not something that is very good for us to. Well, if we don't understand it for what it is, we can just spend our lives trying to inflate it and trying to have status and image, and trying to whatever pump ourselves up falsely with this false self-esteem, right? I'm quite into Eckhart Tolle, and I like his way of explaining things, and I just think he's kind of a cool guy the way he speaks, because he's so soft, and he's kind of got a dry sense of humor sometimes. Anyway, so I mean, if you want help with your ego, I would listen to Eckhart Tolle. There's so many good videos of him on YouTube, but
right.
I sort of subscribe to that alongside everything I've learned about mental health and psychology. I mean, if you're not going to take responsibility for the ego, you're just going to fall into the mainstream and do whatever they want you to do.
In addition to Eckhart Tolle, there's also Gabor Mate, and I recommend anybody whether you think you have emotional issues, intellectual issues or not, time spent with those two individuals can only help, in my experience, because they both have such a profoundly holistic perspective on the world and our tiny little lives within that perspective.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Gabor is exceptionally polite, I think, in the way he words things, and he doesn't just sort of call out the mainstream for what it is. Like
Right.
I think he's trying to keep his hand in the game. But if you speak too bluntly, you're in trouble. Um, like, and you've spoken very bluntly, right? Like you like you have not held back. You said this is what we've done. This is the evidence that communicates, supports what I'm saying, and this is the natural consequence. Like this, it's not like, you're not trying to sweeten it. You're saying this is the bitter truth. Like,
Right.
um,
And I've also tried to show people how they can take on this information without just being angry or disappointed all the time.
mhm.
You know, by the almost everybody by the time they're 12 years old knew that they were going to die, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
knew it. I knew it when I was 11. You knew it. Everybody knows they're going to die, right? Every sort
But
of
they don't want to
coherent.
admit it. They don't want to admit
Right.
it till the last 15 minutes.
Well, well, but here's the thing. Everybody is willing to acknowledge it, admit it, and live accordingly, live in the moment
I'm just looking
when
something
they're
up. Go ahead.
when they're 12. But then by the time they get to be 20, everything has changed. Suddenly, death is for other people, right?
Right, right,
I mean, I see this all the time. People deny their own death right up till the end.
right up till the end. Yeah, you're immortal until you can't be.
I mean, yes, everybody else dies, but surely not me.
Of course. And I mean, we don't. I probably most people would agree. We don't think about it day to day, right? We
Oh, right.
assume it's not really relevant to us.
In my
Yeah.
family, it never came up. And if one of us
Mm-hmm.
kids tried to bring it up, there was immediate change of subject.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So,
people, yeah, they don't like the feelings, so
right,
don't want to talk
right.
about things when you have to feel certain ways.
And I understand that. I get that. I really do. But one of the advantages of actually knowing you're going to die, actually admitting that you're going to die, is it encourages you to live for the here and now.
Yeah.
In the Iliad, Homer writes about how mortals, how humans are mortal. We poor humans are mortal. And he points out that that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's a good thing. Unlike the gods who have to live forever, not get to, have to. They
Right.
have to live forever.
Right.
And so why would they stop to smell the roses? Why would they stop to appreciate any single thing in their infinite lives? Whereas we puny mortals, we have an opportunity to stop and smell that flower. We have an opportunity to taste, like the gods couldn't care less
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
something tastes like. They can always taste it. They got millions of years to taste that cinnamon, whatever.
Right.
And so that was nearly 2,000 years ago that Homer wrote the Iliad. And so he had this understanding that to be mortal is tremendous. It gives us a perspective on our short lives that encourages us to appreciate what we have.
Yeah, and appreciation is a good place to be. I think psychologically, a very good place to be. Gratitude and appreciation. I think it actually, yeah, it releases certain kinds of chemicals in our nervous system and brain body.
Right.
Um,
Right. We all
and
have a
I,
lot of things to not be gratitude for. We all have a lot of things that we don't appreciate about
mhm,
ourselves and about other people, right?
yeah,
There's an infinity of that stuff, but there's not a lot of things that we can point to on a regular basis and say, that was a nice thing. Somebody did a nice thing for me. there's one person who every time I release a video, which is generally twice, sometimes 3 times a week, I release a video. So this video, for example, this one person will send me an email message and say, that was great. Thanks so much for what you do. I get that from one person.
Mm-hmm.
And
One
I
out
think
of
it's
thousands,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I pointed it out to my partner Pauline, all the time. I say, look what so-and-so did. This is amazing. She said these nice things. And it just makes my day.
Yeah, and
That's
it's maybe it makes it even more your day because it's so rare, right? Like,
absolutely. And that's what I mean. People, express your gratitude, people. Tell somebody you appreciate them.
and
Tell
not
them.
just not just because we're saying so, but it actually feels good to be in gratitude.
Yeah.
In one of my podcasts, when I used to do a podcast about BPD, I would often relate examples to when I was in my youth. I was into skateboarding, and I think skateboarders they're pretty happy people because they find the greatest pleasure in the most mundane things, right? Like, so we would skateboard around town and we would be like, oh, this little elevation or this little drop off. This is so much fun. Like, we would find the littlest things to enjoy because of whatever we could just hop off that thing or do other board slides and whatever grinds and stuff. And anyway, and I think those were some of the happiest days of my life because we were always finding the most mundane little things to enjoy, and we were very purposeful about it. We'd go out there and look, right, and be like, that is so cool that we can do that little thing on that little curve.
Right.
But I mean, if you extrapolated that to the larger world, I mean, you could purposefully look and be like, I'm so thankful there's that tree in my yard because all these birds come and congregate and eat the berries, and then I can watch them, and it's so cool that I can see wildlife right there so close outside my window. But you got to be purposeful, right? Instead of it sort of just doing it as a, and it has to be a bit selfish, like because you realize that there's a benefit to it. Like, I'm a happier person and I feel better if I'm being purposeful about looking for little things that make my life better and I don't normally see it, right?
I'm a voluntary board member for the Human Health Education and Research Foundation, and they asked me to prepare a video. This is a few months ago, and so I went outside and I talked about on camera how appreciative I am for all these elements of the natural world. The plants, the trees. This tree right here, for example, as a source of oxygen. So I get to breathe as a result of these plants, and they provide all this food. They do all these things for us. And if each of us can just take a few minutes and think about that sort of thing on a daily basis, that surely that can't hurt.
Expressing
your gratitude not just to another individual for being a decent human being, which is rare enough, but also expressing your gratitude to all those things we take for granted, like the air we breathe and where it comes from, the water we drink, where it comes from. All these things over which we have no control, but we can at least appreciate their existence and therefore ours.
And maybe we could also add, like, when we're kids, right? Like, we're not yet too hyper focused on the money system, right? And like when I was a kid, just with my friends and my skateboard downtown, like that was not part of our psyche built in or activated yet or whatever. Like, so, and maybe that goes to show that if you are, you've become mainstreamed and you're focused on bills and money, and it's sort of like, it's really, really hard to appreciate the little things because you're so focused on whatever the next upgrade or how to have upward mobility in your life or what you're going to tell your friends about all the awesome things you're doing with money, right? Like when that becomes your mentality, it's pretty hard to appreciate the little things. No,
right. Speaking of the little things, I got this great sigh machine from a couple of friends of mine, and so I'm going to demonstrate it to you because very frequently during the day, I'm going to show you. It just does 4 things. You push a button and it makes a sigh. So many times a day, I receive an email message or somebody says something and it makes me go, right? Or that was the male side, by the way. Here's the female side. I can't really tell much difference there. Here's the shocked side. Like somebody will say something and I'm just shocked, really. Good Lord. And then here's the end of the world side. And I think this is why these friends got this for me.
What does it say? Does it say something? Can't quite make it up.
No. It doesn't actually say anything. It's just... It's just a sigh that goes on for a while, and oh my goodness, it's so horrible. See, it saves me a lot of trouble. I don't have to physically sigh during the day because I got this machine I carry with me.
That's funny. Well, sighing is supposed to be helpful for us as well. Sighing, and there's even like laughing therapy where people laugh on without anything to laugh about.
Yes,
just ways to kind of like release in the body, release sound and vibrate the tissues and so on, stuff like that.
Partner Pauline and I created a workshop, and we administered it a few dozen times around the world, and it was intended for people who understood where the planet is with respect to abrupt, irreversible climate change, for people who actually were willing to acknowledge that their lives are short, in other words. And occasionally we'd have somebody who was acquainted with laughter therapy. And so we would have them at the end of this thing as the final action for this 2 or 3 day workshop. We would all get together and do this laughter therapy because it is amazing. The release of endorphins, it just makes everybody feel good. So we've been talking about some pretty serious things for 2 or 3 days, and then to finish like that is wonderful.
So yeah, it's good to like consider, applying some of these things, as you're studying this subject, because it is difficult, heavy material. So, in addition to some of the thinking, the ways of thinking differently about things, you can try some of these, right? And
absolutely. And why would you not?
Yeah, well, people have their priorities, right? I mean, what's at the top of the priority list then? I'm, in mental health, we're quite frustrated to be at the bottom of the barrel quite often, right? What's the most important thing to think about and work on today, right? It's like,
right,
I'm gonna go floss after this video because I was just at the dental hygienist and she asked me how much I floss, and I admit
and it's never enough.
It's not, well, I honestly don't do it enough or hardly at all. So, but she cares about dental health, and because that's what she does. And so I'm gonna try and take that on, because who doesn't need to maintain that part of their health.
I used to say this during presentations, and I would refer to Edward Abbey, the Southwestern American writer, Edward Abbey, and he was told that he has a terminal diagnosis and that he had only a few months to live. And so he said, I guess I don't have to floss my teeth anymore. And so then, and he lived considerably longer than the diagnosis said he was going to live. And he died with some of the worst looking teeth I've ever seen. And so I would tell this story. And so I would tell people that I think our time is short based on the evidence I've seen that I've presented here today, but I'm still going to floss my teeth because those people might be wrong. The peer-reviewed literature actually might be wrong, and it has been in relatively recent history that has granted us a few more years at least. And so I continue to floss my teeth. It's pretty interesting because at the social gathering after one of these presentations, somebody comes up and hands me an unopened package of dental floss.
That's cute. I'll send you one in the mail too. I'll find a special one someday. Yeah. I was just gonna lastly mention, and maybe we don't have the time to cover this one today, and it'll probably irk you a little bit, but I was trying to find the video with you and Noam Chomsky, and I guess there's no video, but I was looking for it on YouTube. And then at the top of the feed, there was this like survey, like, how important do you think climate issues are? And so I clicked on it, and then asked me, do you think it's important, yes or no? And of course I said yes. And then it took me to the results, and apparently the no's are much higher than the yeses for do you care? And then it led me to this article that said whatever 900 professionals and scientists now say that carbon is actually good for the atmosphere, and the carbon sensitivity has been exaggerated, and the Earth has gone through cycles of warmth and cold all through over time. So we don't need to worry like we don't need to buy into the narrative, I guess, like your narrative, right, or similar, that it's been a harmful event to have industrial civilization. So they just flat out deny like greenhouse effect, basically.
Right.
And
I'm relatively recently, there's been a re-emergence of this kind of mentality. And so just within the last few days, somebody sent me a link indicating that more than 1,600 people think that climate change is not something to be concerned about.
That was probably the article.
Right, yeah. Right. And you bring up an important point from it. They say, look what we do in greenhouses. We pump them full of carbon dioxide, and that's fertilizer for the plants. More CO2, more plant growth. So it's all good. As I told students in my classes dating back a very, very long time ago, I can't even remember how long it's been, the late 80s, early 1990s. That's true. If we hold everything else the same, increasing carbon dioxide will actually act as a fertilizer for plants. Yes, that's true. But we're not keeping everything else the same, are we? No, that additional carbon dioxide actually heats up the planet. Well, that's, as it turns out, that's a really bad thing, because the rate of environmental change is really important in terms of the continued survival of every population, community, and species. So if you change the environment too quickly, nobody can keep up. So yes, if we were just changing one thing, if we were only increasing carbon dioxide, and if carbon dioxide was not a greenhouse gas, then things would be getting better. Are things getting better? Take a look around, people. Have you noticed the floods, the fires? Every place that isn't on fire is not on fire because it's raining so much that there's no way to catch anything on fire. It's the literal feast or famine, except in this case, it's fire and famine. It's fire and precipitation and famine all at the same time. So yes, occasionally there's this thing that rises up and makes it into the corporate media, the so-called mainstream media, that points out that more CO2 is better, and so we're doing great. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, I was thinking too, like there have been warmer periods and colder periods, and there was the Little Ice Age, and throughout whatever geological time, right? Like, but if there has never been industrial civilization in there, right? Like,
exactly. Oh, and take this: the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a political organization. Okay, they have scientists get together in small groups and create findings based on consensus. They have to reach consensus or nothing can be released. And then it goes to the governments of the world, and the governments of the world can either remove that information or let it go through. So the IPCC is a political organization. And here's what was written based on the peer-reviewed literature in their report. The report came out October 8th, 2018. And it was called Global Warming of 1.5 degrees. And here's the take-home line: even abrupt geophysical events do not approach current rates of human-driven change. The most important factor controlling the continued survival of populations or species is the rate of environmental change. And, quote, even abrupt geophysical events do not approach current rates of human-driven change. We're causing the world to change so rapidly that organisms can't keep up. That's what matters here.
Right. It's not like a volcano going off once in a while. Like with our
Right.
rapid pulse emissions that never stop. It's like whatever, a volcano going off every few seconds or something, right? Like,
Right. So
is that
every time I get that stuff, I just do this.
Oh, good Lord.
yeah. Yeah. I had one of my colleagues had one of those that said, "I'm surrounded by idiots." Oh man.
As soon as AI got to be a big thing, right? Within the last several months or a year, I can't even keep track anymore. But AI, I've referred to AI as arrogant idiots.
Yeah. Well, AI is going to just speed the whole thing up, right? With because they're all about speed, but I mean they're framing it as innovation, and but it'll help us have better lives. But
Of course.
it's just all about speed, isn't it?
Well, yes. This is a story that I've heard and you've heard your entire life. Every new piece of technology that comes along is a good thing. Right? Everything. Everything from the candle to the light bulb to everything. Everything. I mean, remember when we didn't have these things? I remember when we didn't have these things. I remember when you had to stand next to the phone and talk into it. You couldn't even walk away.
Yeah.
These things were amazing.
It was so horrible. We couldn't even get through in those days.
Right. Everything is better when it comes along. And then pretty soon you realize that I can't go anywhere without this thing. This thing runs my life.
Well, the interesting thing about humans is when they've created technology, they don't assess for the impacts before they release it, right?
No.
So like the iPhone, like, so they're just like, we got this cool thing, we're just going to put it out there, and now we've realized after, since 2008 that suicide in teen girls has gone up dramatically and has a lot to do with social media, but like to study those things ahead of time, to actually understand maybe the ethical, moral, biological, psychological impacts. Like, I don't understand why humans don't do that.
Because this is what we do. This is what we do. 1, flight or fight. 2, reproduce. 3, accumulate material possessions. Okay, so flight or fight, we survived. Whew, now what do? Make babies. Okay, now that we made babies and we're relatively comfortable, and I had my 2 or 7 or 42 children, whatever it is that makes me fit in now. Now what's number 3? The third most important item, driven by natural selection, is accumulate material possessions. How many people do you know doesn't have one of these? It's everybody.
Like, it's almost like we're locked into it now because everything is integrated into that.
Yes.
It's almost like it's like the banking system. You can't live without it, like whatever.
Right. You can't get along without every new piece of technology. How did the world get to be this way?
Yeah. Technology owns us, really. Unless we want to live in the bushes or on the streets, then that's our choice, really.
Right.
Except for my dad, who is now 83 years old and he has never had a smartphone. He's a total rebel.
Get this, I have a friend who's almost exactly 5 years older than me, so 68 years old, and he doesn't have a phone. He doesn't have a phone.
Yeah.
How can that even be?
Yeah.
And it's annoying sometimes because I'm trying to get a hold of his character, and here's my response at the end of the day.
Oh, good Lord.
Gotta have a phone, man. This what makes you part of this world.
Oh, yeah. It's got to be harder to get by without the phone, and I got to give my dad props for that, but
right.
Pretty sure his wife has one, so
so he puts the pressure on her, right?
Well,
so I deactivated my Facebook and Twitter accounts when I realized this is just pure nonsense and I don't have time for it and it's ruining my life. But I take advantage all the time of partner Pauline having access to Facebook. Hey, can you look up something for me?
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, that's probably not playing fair.
Well,
anyway, should we wrap this up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Tell us again about your course.
Yeah. So for anyone who's interested in learning more about mental health, whether for borderline personality disorder or otherwise, the course is helpful. If the more you learn about mental health, the more compassionate you can be towards yourself and others. And I don't know, the better your life moments can be, because you are applying some practices that make the brain work better, basically. So yeah, how could that hurt? You're making the world a better place and you're also being a bit of a rebel by learning about mental health, because the world does not want you to know these things, as far as I can tell. They want you to be sick and in debt, and they want you to, be on the verge of suicide. Doesn't have to be that way. So yeah, take the initiative and get enlightened. And if it's okay, I'll say my band Live Avengers, I think we're going to come up with 2 new singles in the next month or 2, so hang in there.
That's great.
Thanks for listening,
great.
if you are. Yeah.
And on the blog and just beneath this video in the description, I'll put the link to freebptcourse.com.
Cool. Thank you.
So look for that, anybody who's made it this far. Well, thanks again, Peter. And I look forward to meeting again. It's pretty interesting, because every time we get together, before we go to record mode, we talk about how we don't have anything to talk about.
Yeah.
So
sure.
surely this is going to be the last time.
Yeah, surely.
And then so far, it hasn't been the last time. So there you go.
No, we got a system. A system in the system.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Look forward to the next one.
For sure.